Do you have a warrant to be here?
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
Isn't it funny to listen to a trust fund baby lecturing Canadians about being too rich?
Mr. Speaker, we see proof that the Conservatives simply don't understand that low-income families don't benefit from tax breaks because they don't pay taxes.
Canadians are struggling to put food on the table, and what are the Liberals doing? Well, they're giving $25 million to Costco and Loblaws. And what are the
Speaker, the NDP leader was just asking about why the Prime Minister gave tens of millions of dollars in corporate handouts to powerful grocery chains. So the answer, of course, is that he voted to let the Prime Minister do that. Not a single penny of that money could have gone without the vote of the NDP coalition partner. But
Mr. Speaker, we can see very clearly that all the stories out about the lobbyists' connections with the Leader of the Opposition are actually hurting the Leader of the Opposition, which is why he's asking those questions of the NDP. But he has an opportunity right now, Mr. Speaker.
You know, this show reminds me of a 25-cent cigar.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Because it's cheap and it stinks.
CBC refuses to tell Parliament just how many gag orders they have on current or former employees. When an inquiry of the Heritage Ministry prompted the state broadcaster to divulge to the House of Commons just how many non-disclosure agreements have been imposed on staff, the CBC refused, citing time constraints. The question was posed by NDP MP Don Davies. He asked the CBC and its French language counterpart to inform the House on the number of non-disclosure agreements, non-disparagement agreements, and confidentiality agreements that the CBC signed with employees and contractors for each year in the last 10 years. In a hint to the enormity of the number of gag orders of some form, chronic House flipper Liberal MP Talib Noor Mohammed, as the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage, responded that as part of its business and employment activities, CBC Radio Canada concludes a wide variety of contract and agreements, many of which could include non-disclosure or confidentiality provisions. However, CBC Radio Canada does not track the specific number of those references. To gather the information requested, an extensive manual search and review of each contract concluded by the corporation would be required. Is it too much work to track down the numerous gag orders? Is it too much like actual journalism to read the records and come up with a number? What's going on at the CBC? What sort of toxic work environment is this taxpayer-funded behemoth percolating down there? For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. I think it's time to sell the CBC, don't you? You know, part it out like an old used car, let the private sector buy the usable pieces, and let the employees find their way in the world. If you agree with me, might I suggest you head on over to rebelnewsstore.com, use the coupon code Sheila10 for 10% off, and get yourself this great Sell the CBC shirt. Again, that's rebelnewsstore.com, coupon code Sheila10 for 10% off.
The macro situation is really, really good.
Obviously, our economy is trash.
Taxes are constantly going up. That's just more and more money out of our pocket. Takes away from our kids, takes away from everything.
Gas, groceries, bills, like just everything goes up and up.
Whatever fits the budget is whatever I'm eating for the day.
It's not even cheap to stay home anymore. Every time I go to the grocery store, I'm shocked about the food prices.
People are working more hours, they're not necessarily getting paid more, and their money is worth less. So it's like you're doing more effort, but it's like you're burning more fumes.
I was just looking on Craigslist today, and a 2-bedroom place is like $2,800. How am I supposed to afford that?
I feel like I've been priced out, like I'm stuck in my apartment. I can't move out anymore.
Our macro situation is really, really good. But then the question becomes, what do we do with that best fiscal position in the world right now?
We can fish like a Newfoundlander.
We can dig potatoes in PEI.
We grow wheat in the golden prairies.
Cross Rockies we can fly.
from shore to shore.
From shore to shore.
And in between.
And in between.
The old and young.
The rich and poor. The tall and short. The English, French.
The Greek and Chinese too.
Yeah! We're Canadian through and through. We're glad that you're Canadian too.
We need not look or sound the same
To help each other play a game.
We all help in our special way.
And that's what makes proud Canadians say Canada's a place where we want to stay. Hey, 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 hey.
We can fish like a Newfoundlander.
We can dig potatoes in PEI.
We grow wheat in the golden prairies.
Across the Rockies we can fly.
We're Canadian through and through. We're proud that you're Canadian too.
Hey folks, big news broke in the Globe and Mail this morning. $1 billion was paid to 3 of Justin Trudeau's favorite firms. Now those same 3 firms have also been suspended, though the government won't say why they're suspended. They will say that, of course, no one did anything wrong with any of the contracting in Justin Trudeau's Ottawa. Justin Trudeau's increased the use of outside consultants by 60% since he came into office. And we heard from one of his favorite contractors, one of these 3 contractors who was part of the $1 billion in payments, that their commission is 30%. So we have a couple of companies with only a couple of employees each making 30%, but not doing any of the actual work that they're being contracted for. So hundreds of millions of dollars going to these insiders who escape accountability. We have the NDP now saying that it's too expensive for MPs to actually use their time in meetings to discuss this. But they have no issue, of course, with the grift and the corruption, because now it's their job to protect Justin Trudeau and the Liberals as part of their coalition deal. Look, this is unacceptable. We have Canadians lined up at food banks in record number, people struggling to pay the bills. Mortgage rates have doubled. The needed down payment for a home has doubled. We have people now spending 25 years saving just to try and be able to afford the down payment, not to pay off their home. And Justin Trudeau and his NDP Liberal coalition are busy trying to defend the indefensible. An increase in outside consultants, the likes of which we've never seen, costing tens of billions of dollars last year. But we know that just 3 of the companies took in $1 billion. So of course, common sense conservatives are going to continue to demand answers. We have hearings happening this week. We're going to have the president of the CBSA in front of committee tomorrow, because even though the NDP Liberal coalition doesn't want the truth to come out, we're going to continue to kick at the darkness until daylight, sunshine, the best disinfectant, shines in, because Justin Trudeau is not worth the cost of the $1 billion that he spent on just these 3 consultants. And he, of course, isn't worth the sky-high commissions, the hundreds of millions of dollars that Ottawa insiders are getting. And common sense conservatives are going to expose it all. Stay tuned.
Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
I wanted to start just by talking a little bit about the fact that we're here at a conference that's focused on the future of social policy, but also looking ahead. And if you take a look at the future, we'll do that in a moment. Look back for a moment. What do you think, if you take the last 25 years or so, the most important bit of social policy in this country has been?
Last 25 years, but the last 23 years don't count? Is that the, no, I think obviously what we've seen over the past generation has been a greater degree of not just this wanting and thinking that it would be nice if everyone had real opportunities to succeed. But we've seen the hard data and the policy evidence and the justification that demonstrates that when you give more people better opportunities, everyone does better. And that's where I feel over the past 2 years we've been, as a government and as Canadians, incredibly fortunate to have been able to get the support of thinkers like there are in this room, and obviously of the Caledon Institute, to actually say, no, if you do this, good things will happen to the whole of the economy. And quite frankly, when we first got elected 2 years ago with a plan where we hadn't, because you're the third party, you don't get the support of all the civil servants who are working for the government. We reached out to a whole bunch of experts across civil society, including Caledon Institute, obviously. And they said, well, these are the things you should do. And when we got to Ottawa and said, well, these are the things we're going to do, a whole bunch of people within finance and within the government said, well, yeah, no, that's not the way to grow the economy. And we said, well, yes, it is, and we're going to do this. Well, okay, but it's not going to have the results you want. Anyway, we did these kinds of things, and not only did it have the results we had hoped for, it's going faster than we did by putting money in the pockets of the people who need it and being, meaningfully moving the dial in terms of helping people. The benefits are tremendous.
Social policy is interesting because it can work and it can be successful or viewed positively in the moment. History can look back on it and say, we got it wrong and we've made a huge mistake. In the context of where you were on Friday and what you're going to be doing tomorrow with a couple of major apologies, I'm wondering what you think the biggest mistake when it comes to social policy is in the last 25 years or so. What have we got wrong in this country?
We've got it pretty good in Canada. In contrast to our neighbors, perhaps in some ways, we've avoided a lot of some of the social tensions that other people have had, or they've been placed in different orders, different places, and that has led to sometimes a kind of complacency that leads to blind spots. When we compare ourselves to some of the very real challenges that our nearest neighbors are struggling with, whether it be around race, whether it be around poverty, we all remember the videos of Katrina, we can sort of sit back and say, oh, you know what, at least in Canada we're doing pretty well. And that's not true. And it's certainly not true for everyone. And being much more aware of people living with systemic and real challenges and vulnerabilities, whether it be racialized communities, whether it be Indigenous peoples, of course, or whether it be just people falling through the cracks, I don't think there has been enough attention paid to the voiceless who haven't been doing very well. And don't get noticed because they're voiceless. And I think that's something that all of us are working hard to turn around, but we have a long way to go still.
There's a big announcement, tomorrow, in terms of an apology to members of the LGBT community who were in the military, who were discriminated against and more because of who they are. What do you want what you say tomorrow to say about us as a nation?
I think there's a really interesting and important discussion to have around apologies and around ills of the past. And certainly a number of people are highlighted, and I have this reflection as well, that my father might have had a different perspective on it than I do. But he came at it as an academic, as a constitutionalist. I come at it as a teacher, as someone who's worked a lot in communities. And the apologies for things past are important to make sure that we actually understand and know and share and don't repeat those mistakes. That's why a big piece of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission asked us to ensure that we were changing school curricula so students actually get, non-Aboriginal students across the country get the right kind of education about this. But apologies are also really important to be able to move forward in a healing way that acknowledges the very real intergenerational impacts or impacts on an individual around mental health, around self-worth, around how you fit into your community. I mean, for me, it's it comes back to that question of, well, why do we still feel it important for politicians to march in gay pride parades, for example? It's still important. There is still so much discrimination that recognizing it will make a big difference, and it will also help a whole bunch of people who would never have to, hopefully wouldn't have to go through in their future careers the kind of discrimination that happened in the past decades, but also remind everyone else that we do have to change mindsets.
You last week released this plan for the National Housing Strategy, and this is something that people in this room have been calling for a long time, and people are very happy about. You said that housing is a right. What does that mean when you say housing is a right?
Well, first of all, housing as a right is something that Canada has agreed to under certain governments in international fora for many, many years. We understand, in the way my friend Adam Vaughan talks about it all the time, is housing is not a problem, it's a solution. It's a building block. It's a way to solve challenges around poverty, around exclusion, around mental health, around addiction, around economic opportunity, around education. Like, all these things come together. And recognizing a rights-based approach to housing fundamentally, for me, weaves it into those fundamental things that a society needs to make sure that its citizens have access to in order to be a full and free and really successful society in any way, shape, or form. So recognizing housing as a right folds it in, or recognizing a rights-based approach to housing looks at all the different determinants, all the different aspects of it, and recognizes that in order to solve for that rights-based approach, we do have to tackle poverty. We do have to tackle homelessness. We do have to do a better job with mental health. We do have to do a better job with poverty and raising kids in low-income households. We do have to do a better job around things like public transit and make sure that you can get to an affordable neighborhood from the job that you just got in a way that works. I mean, these are the kinds of things that all fold together, and putting a rights-based approach to it means that it is an obligation for governments to engage with it. And we can't just sort of shrug it off and say, well, if we make sure that the economy is growing and people have an opportunity, housing will take care of itself. No, it needs an active engagement and an active sense of responsibility by different orders of government in order to address it.
Would you add it to the Charter?
I think that's... I could go to my easy, I'm not opening the Constitution, that's a real mess in order to do that. But I think that's a conversation that people should have a decade from now, a few decades from now. I think we have...
Why a few decades?
Because I think what it actually means and what the impact on society and how we actually shape creating enough housing stock. I mean, right now, if someone were to say, I have a right to housing, a government could say, I have a lovely 3-bedroom apartment for you, but I know you live in Toronto. It's just you're going to have to move to Miramichi or to Saskatoon or to some other part of the country. Recognizing it as a right and leaving it at that is not actually the solution. Recognizing it as a system of which it is an essential part is a big piece of it. But if you're going to start adding rights to the Charter, there's a whole list of things that various people have talked for. Property rights on the one hand, on one side of the political spectrum, environmental rights, clean water on the other side. Things that we agree absolutely need rights-based approaches, but I'm not going near opening up the Constitution.
I ask in part just because the concern from some people is an announcement as powerful as the one may have been last week, and with as much money attached to it, people worry about political timelines, and they worry about the fact that you can make a commitment now, but how do you ensure that social policy survives the churn of government?
Well, a big piece of it is enshrining it as a rights-based piece of legislation and an aspect that, whether it's creating a third-party oversight mechanism or an ombudsperson to ensure that we're moving in the right direction and continuing to do so, elevating the discourse, so this is the kind of conversation we have, so no future government can sort of say, oh, well, it's more of a provincial area of responsibility, so we're going to step back like the last government did. I think the other big thing is it's easy to change a big dump of money into one single grand gesture. It's harder to change incremental but meaningful, substantial process that happens over time. And the one thing that we wanted to ensure that we have is guaranteeing that the money is there over a long horizon. Because that's what we've heard from provinces, whether they'll talk about healthcare accords or infrastructure investments. Provinces, municipalities, organizations need that predictability, and that's what we've put in. The other thing is we're doing something really big and really important, and if we do want the right things to last, we got to make sure that they are built right. Because it's far easier for a government to look at a future government to look at a program that didn't work and say, well, we're canceling that. If we take the time, with everyone here understands, to make sure we're getting it absolutely right, and we're not talking about a 5 or 6 year horizon, we're talking about the next 2 years, which is going to mean an awful lot of very hard work by the types of folks, and actually the folks in this room, to make sure we're designing it exactly right to help people. Then it becomes good policy that is irreversible. I mean, for all, to use an example that Sherry and Ken helped us out so deeply on in the lead up to the election, the Canada Child Benefit. I mean, you guys will remember the campaign rhetoric from the NDP on Canada Child Benefit. It should be universal. Child benefits should be universal, and we're saying, well, no, you don't want to send child benefit checks to millionaires. And on the other hand, the Conservatives were very, very focused on their model of child benefits and argued against ours. But you don't hear anyone suggesting that they would reverse those child benefits, both because it's great policy and because it's having such a very positive impact. So when you create good policy that meaningful helps individuals and demonstrates the positive impacts on the economic frame of the country, as we've seen over the past couple of years, it becomes impossible to overturn by future governments, regardless of their ideologies.
How do you square that with timelines that people have here? We did an interview on Friday on our program with a woman who was homeless for 4 years. And she said she knew that she was going to be homeless because things were falling through the cracks. And you could, if you were paying attention, you could have checked those boxes off and stopped her before she hit the bottom. Yeah. That's a problem that's happening right now in cities like this, in cities across the country. How do we deal, if there is relentless incrementalism that works down the line, how do we deal with the crisis that we're in right now?
Oh, there is money starting to flow in many ways right now. I mean, we recognize, one of the absurdities we have is when a child leaves foster care at 18, in many places you don't actually get to talk about homelessness strategy applying to them until they've experienced 6 months of homelessness. Well, by the time someone has experienced 6 months of homelessness as a 18 to 18 or 19 to 19 and a half year old, they've developed challenges and problems that are going to have echoes for the next decade, if not the rest of their lives. And being a lot smarter about how we respond quicker is something that we absolutely have to do. So it's not just about, excuse me, it's not just about getting it right. It's showing and demonstrating the willingness and the presence to work with partners right now to start making immediate differences by boosting programs that exist right now, while we get around to refurbishing or repairing 300,000 units and building 100,000 new ones, which is not going to happen overnight, but will significantly make a difference as it happens over the next year or two.
Part of this is about looking ahead 25 years. And I wanted to ask you a question. It's about a different kind of social policy, but we have seen a real change or certainly a real conversation in the last 6 weeks, 2 months, certainly in the last little bit, about what people face at work, what people face, whether it's in the entertainment industry, whether it's in business, whether it's in the lives that they lead, what women face in particular. The success of the Me Too hashtag has been extraordinary and has led people to speak about sexual harassment in a way that perhaps they haven't felt free to otherwise. What do you make of what's happening right now? This is a policy issue for a lot of people because it's going to shape where they are and who they are. What do you make of what's happening right now when it comes to that issue?
This is where I, unlike the previous question, I float back exactly 25 years. 25 years ago this year, I was in my undergrad at McGill, and I joined the McGill Student Society Sexual Assault Center because McGill didn't need a sexual assault center because there was, of course, no sexual assault happening on campus. So it was the Student Society. That was the frame we were told at that point. And as parents were coming to visit, they didn't want to have a McGill Sexual Assault Center. They wanted to have a McGill Student Society doing their own sexual assault center. It was a ridiculous distinction that unfortunately in too many places still continues today. And I got to work firsthand with an issue that 25 years later we're still just sort of scratching the surface on. There's an awakening happening over these past weeks, but it has taken years and decades of activism and pushing and frustration and willfully ignoring the facts by institutions and cultures to get a change to happen. And even then, there's still so much more to do.
Well, and it's happening. We had a conversation with your employment minister, Patty Hedju, the Labour minister, and she was talking about the Hill and Parliament Hill and the atmosphere in Ottawa being rife for this sort of abuse. So you've dealt with allegations within your own caucus. Mm-hmm. Are there more of those, allegations that you would be dealing with, complaints that you have been investigating?
I hope not. We have been very, very clear. I have been very, very clear. There's zero tolerance. We've done extensive training sessions and contracts signed by all members of our team, not just the MPs, but the entire culture around our political party and spreading it to having a harassment policy on the Hill. Parliament Hill is a workplace like many others, and therefore has the same kinds of challenges others have. But we also have a responsibility to lead and be a model for solving the challenges that exist elsewhere.
Do we need legislation? The legislation goes to federal workplaces, but do we need legislation? And this is a social policy piece that would protect people beyond those federal workplaces, that would say this is not acceptable. We know it's not acceptable, but would have that in legislation?
For me, legislation is a tool, and if it can be shown to be effective, but what we fundamentally need is a shift in mindset, a shift so that people realize this isn't just an issue for women in the workplace or for certain people in the workplace. This is an issue that affects all of us, and to make sure that each and every one of us is stepping up when there are comments, when there is harassment. The number of people who come out whenever there's a news about this person or that person, a whole bunch of people shrug and say, oh yeah, no, I wasn't surprised at all by that. We saw that coming for a long time. Well, why didn't you say something then? Or other people said, well, I had no idea, but we're not yet having those proactive conversations about the shifts in mindsets that need to happen. And popular culture and traditional dynamics and everything we're surrounded with has created a structure within the patriarchal approach that we traditionally have that minimizes certain voices and gives authority or deference. Or I remember having an argument with around a table at a global event and I won't use any names, where one prominent person was complaining because they were on the board of some university and saying, one girl comes forward and you've ruined this young student's life for the rest of his life. And I said, well, wait a second. What about the 99 young women who don't come forward and how their lives are ruined? And the person next to me said, oh, wow, you actually really do believe the stuff you're saying. You're not just saying it because it's I'm like, oh my God, there's so much work to do to try and change mindsets within society. And I'm the first to say that I don't have all the answers, but as a leader, as a feminist, as a father of kids who are approaching teenage age with troubling speed, a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and there's that tween. Anyway, it's those questions and the discussions we have to have about, as I've said many times, raising my daughter to be a feminist, yes, but also raising my sons to be a feminist, and understanding power dynamics and imbalances, and the need to be there to stick up for friends who are or individuals who are being victimized or being marginalized or being harassed or bullied. This is something that we have to really, really focus on as a society. Maybe there's probably a number of legislative fixes we can move, but legislation is one angle. There are so many other ways that we need to also work to change society.
Can I end just looking ahead? You mentioned your kids. And if you think of social policy in the next 25 years and the world that they're going to be stepping into, what is the piece of social policy that you want to see implemented to make their lives better?
Well, I think that the exciting thing is that we've started we've seen rise, and we're celebrating it today, the next 25 years of social policy thinkers, of activists who are armed with data and proof points that are actually changing the conversation and taking back this conversation from the social side of things that's sort of nice to haves to, no, if you want to create a strong, resilient economy, you need to fold in fundamental thinking about social policy to make sure that you're creating both the confidence and the opportunities to succeed for all of our citizens. I think what we've managed to do in a certain way with our success over the past 2 years is due to all the hard work done by folks like Ken Battle to really lead the way on making a cold, hard case for something that too often gets pushed into the, lovey-dovey, nice-to-have kinds of things. And I think if there's anything that I'm looking forward to in the coming years, it'll be the further concretization of not just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. I mean, it's something we talk about when you talk about getting more women on the boards or getting better diversity in an organization. But there's so many more things that we can be doing and succeeding in if we are actually looking at this through the cold, harsh light of this is the right thing to do because it's the smart thing to do, and not just because it's the progressive, give each other a hug model of building societies. That approach, I think, is one of the most exciting innovations that we have, where intuitively what people feel of is the right thing to do is often, in many cases, the smart thing to do.
Prime Minister, thank you.
What a pleasure, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You don't have to listen to Bill's Bandy Doughboy or Team Sexy. I'll tell you what. I'll have a little drink. Celebrate your little picnicky.
This place is going to shit again. You haven't started the recycling program. The park is a complete mess.
Frig off, Burb. Listen for a play at the...
Leahy, I'm not judging anybody here, all right? Okay?
Please don't show this to anyone.
I'm going to hospital. I'm not going to hospital, you idiot. Just think about car. Look at my. It's a flesh wound.
Ricky shot himself. Like, he shot himself, and then he's yelling at us, man. That's ridiculous, dude. He's all yelling at us. We didn't even do anything, man. It's his fault. What do we get for it? Bullshit.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, and yes, I will say it with complete confidence, will be Canada's next great Prime Minister.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. You recognize Larry Brock, the man making the very bold prediction from the intro? He's a lot to watch, guys, all the time on fire in committee. These are some of the videos that we focus on. This committee stuff, guys, like and subscribe. You'll enjoy it. You probably don't see this side of politics very often. We cover it here. Let's take a closer look at Larry Brock. Point of order. It gets nuts in committee every time. We've got a couple of villains that make appearances in this one. Let's take a look. Larry Brock is a man on fire.
Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, and yes, I will say it with complete confidence, will be Canada's next great Prime Minister. I start by sharing the initial commentary from my colleague, Mr. Curic. Just how disappointed that he was to hear the commentary from Ms. Khalid in terms of the framing of her motion, and how shocked she was and how disturbed she was. You know, the hypocrisy from that member, and quite frankly the entire Liberal bench on these two issues is just astounding. The lengths they will go to try to change the channel on where public opinion is with the Liberal Party of Canada and their leader Justin Trudeau. It really speaks to how low they have sunk, and the attempts that they will do and try to fearmonger, to frighten and scare Canadians. Pretty much the entire playbook of the Liberal Party of Canada since Justin Trudeau became leader of the party, literally in 2013. It was all about scaremongering. Even before 2013, one can make the argument, going back to the 2004 and 2006 election under PM Martin and Chrétien, the lengths by which they will go to try to paint any leader of the Conservative Party of Canada as a boogeyman. And that Canadians ought to be fearful that there is somehow a hidden agenda, that they will say one thing and quite frankly do another, which really is the playbook of Justin Trudeau and has been since he formed government in 2015. But it's more pronounced now because, let's face it, they're down 20+ points in the polls. They have been down for well over a year. Chair.
Go ahead on your point of order.
Just talking about relevance, I'd encourage the member to come back to the topic at hand.
Go ahead,
and
Mr.
relevance
Brock.
is very subjective, as I telegraphed to the party. My speaking remarks are at least 2 hours long. So I will get to relevant points of Ms. Khalid's motion in due course.
Standing up for the rights of victims. Mr. Brock has the floor.
I got you. I apologize.
Go ahead, Mr. Brock. And I'm not going to accept any interruptions here. We've talked about this many times. Relevance is subjective. Mr. Brock will get to his points and make his points in an appropriate manner, and I don't want any interruptions unless it's related to the actual standing orders, and you can cite those. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
So gang, that's Iqra Khalid. She's an MP, Liberal MP, always a thorn in the side of these committee meetings. Anyhow, here's a very quick look at her, but then we're going to get back to Larry Brock, because these committee meetings, I do want you to like and subscribe. They're always wild guys. People don't see this side of Canadian politics. It's fun in a way.
A good part of the country agrees. Now, don't bring me into this debate with these frivolous points of order on tone, particularly when you take issue with the word Mr. Barrett used and then use it yourself to describe his actions, thereby reinforcing the point it is accurate. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Chair?
Is it a point of order, Ms. Khalid?
Yes, Chair. Again, on the same point of order on decorum, I would appreciate if the chair, I'm talking about a different person now, if the chair himself could be a little bit more nonpartisan in how he conducts
Okay, Ms. Khalid, don't bring me into your bun fights, and I will be nonpartisan and conduct the meeting. You're going to continue to disrupt opposition members from asking questions, then I will get involved and make a ruling, as is my job. I'm not just a potted plant up here that's going to watch the clock. But as you get more political and try to cut opposition members from asking legitimate committee questions, I will reinforce their rights as members to ask it. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Our leader had been elected, and there has been a consistent drive to water down and eliminate that Liberal support. And it's obviously must be extremely disappointing to many long-standing members of the Liberal Party of Canada. It's not surprising that we have a number of ministers who've decided not to run for re-election. We have a number of MPs deciding not to run for re-election. There is a phrase that I'm not going to use, but it's clear that they too look at the polls and they know that public opinion is changing. It's changing for a number of reasons, Mr. Chair. There's always, and always has been, a shelf life for any political party. That applies to the Liberal Party, that applies to the Conservative Party. People get tired of being promised a number of things pre-election merely to buy a vote and then to be profoundly disappointed when the Prime Minister of the day does not deliver. And that's precisely what's happening with Justin Trudeau. I'm sure he and the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and the entire Finance Department, if not the entire Liberal bench, thought that the spring budget would finally end some negativity towards their economic policies, that they were going to make it fairer for a number of generations, that it wasn't strictly about the middle class. Now it's fairness for multiple generations. But what are we seeing in the budget? We're seeing the same worn-out talking points that Justin Trudeau promised Canadians in 2015 and completely has not delivered on, particularly in the area, in my view, of public safety. And I'm going to get to relevant points in due course. But it's just indicative, emblematic of why this party and its members are just so desperate to find something other than to take a look at their track record. The budget has fallen flat on its face. One could have made the argument that the Prime Minister was going to drop the writ 2 or 3 weeks ago with his cross-country tour and all his ministers following along and delivering all these little goodies as to what they can expect from the budget. But nothing has moved the channel because Canadians are wise and Canadians are intelligent. And they have finally realized that this Prime Minister, who they thought was going to conduct governance so much more differently. Let's all remember his famous words in 2015, how he would do politics different, that his administration would be known as the most transparent, accountable, and responsible government this country has ever seen. But then you take a look at everything that has transpired. Their non-willingness to provide documents at committee, instructing their members to filibuster when it comes to exposing elements of corruption and unethical behavior. The list goes on and on and on. I could spend hours doing a deep dive, just taking a look at the number of scandals that has rocked Justin Trudeau and members of his cabinet, members of his backbench, literally since 2015. Canadians are wise individuals, Mr. Chair, and they remember these things. So with all the good efforts that the Liberal members of this committee are trying to do now, trying to scare Canadians and fearmonger, in my view, is going to fall flat on its face. Let's take, for instance, this whole concept of the scariness of the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause, surprise, surprise, introduced by Justin's father himself, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, well over 40 years ago. And that notwithstanding clause in the last 40 plus years has not been amended. It has been in the books for a very long time. And while no federal government has exercised its use, does not necessarily mean, in fact, I'll say definitively, does not mean that it's inappropriate to use it in the future. We know that some provincial premiers have used it. You know, and where was the backlash from Justin Trudeau? Well, I guess there was a little bit of backlash. He talked a good game, but he didn't do anything about it. When Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, talked about it, when the Premier of Quebec talked about it. This is something that is law in this country. And for all the non-lawyers on the Liberal bench, I invite them all to take the time, it'll take you less than 2 minutes, to actually read Section 33 of the Charter. That when used, clearly, and I'm just paraphrasing it, when used, it's not permanent. It's reviewable at 5 years. So when we take a look at the comments recently made by our leader, these are comments, Mr. Chair, that have not changed or been altered in any which way from the first moment that he talked about the applicable use of the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause, despite the best efforts of Ms. Khalid to try to open up the floodgates and widen the potential abuse of the notwithstanding clause to scare Canadians, to be fearful of the use of that clause, because now it might be applied to reproductive rights, is an absolute joke. And it's offensive, because she knows full well, as does every member of that Liberal bench, where the Conservative Party of Canada stands on that issue. Dead stop. No further discussion needed. But that won't stop the Liberals. That will not stop them. They will continue to scare Canadians into believing that Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, and yes, I will say it with complete confidence, will be Canada's next great Prime Minister.
So gang, what do you think? Larry Brock, right? He's fun to watch for sure. Khalid is an issue all the time in these committee meetings. You've got to come and join the channel, not join the channel, but subscribe, like, share, get notified, all that fun stuff. We do a live program here every day as well with question period, or if it's not there on that day, we cover some live stuff and it's fun. Come and join the chat room, the community, it's great. But these committee meetings, that's another reason to check out the channel. That's all I'm saying. I'm Aaron. This is
Good morning, John. In the year 2000, Juan and Pedro Sanchez, two brothers in Mexico, were drilling down in a mine, like a lead and silver mine. It was hot down there, like 130 degrees Fahrenheit. It was, I imagine, unpleasant and dangerous work. And mines are always contending with a lot of different hazards. One of them, though, is water, because mines are underground, and water goes down. People and equipment both work best when they are not submerged in 130-degree water, so mines almost always have huge pumps that remove a tremendous amount of water from the ground so that people and machines can work down there. Well, in this mine in Mexico, something magnificent had been uncovered by those pumps. With that water taken out, those brothers drilled down into a giant cave full of some of the largest crystals ever discovered on Earth. Now, an important thing to know, you cannot go visit these crystals. One, because the mine has since stopped pumping the water out, and so that cavern is now full of water again. But maybe more importantly, the scientists who did get a chance to go down into this cave, they had to wear some very special suits, and those suits were designed to do two things. One, keep them cool, because not only is it 130 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 55 Celsius, it was also extremely humid, because there's a lot of water down there, and all that water was evaporating into that very hot air. And so it was like 90 to 99% humidity in there, which meant that the water that you sweat can't evaporate from your skin into the air. There's no room left.
Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I'm standing outside Rumble Live, which was a co-production between Rumble, the free speech live streaming platform, and Rebel. And we had a bunch of great speakers today, including Donald Trump Jr. Bit of a big name there, pretty exciting. Lots of free speech advocacy going on. But the event almost didn't happen. And I want to tell you about that because I have a rule of thumb, which is when people try and extort you, when they try and blackmail you, I think you have a moral obligation to pull the trigger on that and go public with it. And I have to say that we were blackmailed for today's event, not by some criminal, but by the government of Canada. See, the venue we're using, a beautiful venue, is run by a great guy who was happy to have us book both the Rumble event with Don Jr. and the Rebel News Live event on Saturday. And why not? We're good customers. We don't make a mess. Everything's fine. We've been doing these Rebel News Live events for 9 years. Never a problem. We like to have security just to make people feel safe, but we've literally never had a problem in 9 years. So we were proceeding with these events, but something happened, and I guess I should have been alive to it, because Downsview Park, which is the name of this location, it's an old military base. In fact, there's still an airstrip that the Prime Minister uses when he flies to Toronto. So the land underneath these event venues, underneath these sports venues, is still owned by the Government of Canada, by a Crown corporation called Canada Lands Company. Now, it just holds a lot of land, but it's a regular landlord. It's not supposed to be political. It's not supposed to be partisan. It's just to manage the land. Everything was going great until the event venue received a threat from the property manager for Canada Lands Company saying that they have to cancel the event unless they spend $49,000 on unnecessary security. Now, like I said before, we always do hire security. If you've ever been to a Rebel News event, you know that. But the demand from Canada Lands Company was so bizarre and outrageous, to hire dozens of extra security, to hire off-duty Toronto police officers, literally paying cops to be here, even to buy barriers so that if hundreds of protesters come up, we pay for the barriers for them. And they even demanded that we buy 2 porta potties for the protesters. Now, our event owner was terrified of this. He said that if he didn't go along with this, he felt intimidated that they might rip up his lease. And although he's making money off of these events, it certainly couldn't match a lifetime's worth of business that he would lose if he got on the wrong side of the Canada Lands Company. This is the first time he has ever been threatened by them, of course. But it all came together because you know whose jurisdiction Downsview Park is? A crooked Liberal MP named Yara Sachs. Remember her? She's the one who actually went on TV. She stood up in Parliament and said when truckers go honk honk, that actually means Heil Hitler. Take a look at this.
How much vitriol do we have to see of honk honk which is an acronym for Hail Hitler.
Yeah, she's a total crackpot, but she's a local MP here. And you might remember that recently she flew to Ramallah in the West Bank to meet with the terrorist leader Mahmoud Abbas and posed for a selfie with her, even though Yara Sachs herself is Jewish and would be killed by him. Well, we did a whole campaign about that, driving a billboard truck around the district, even mailing a brochure to her constituents, even doing streeters. Remember this?
Backstabbing us right in front of our face.
Is she actually holding his hand?
I know, it's crazy. Yara Sachs.
Yes, and this is a bad guy.
She has disowned her own people, and I think she's looking for political gains.
I'm not surprised by anything. Am I afraid? I'm very afraid.
Well, revenge of Yara Sachs. We're on her turf, and she wanted us to know it. The Canada Lands Company, which has no business doing politics, which does not get involved with security of a venue, which had no jurisdiction whatsoever, threatened the owner of this venue that if he did not pay $49,000 for these absurd security requirements that were utterly unnecessary. By the way, if I didn't mention it, there's not a single protester here. There never would be. It's absurd. There was no basis for it. It was a cancel culture move where Yara Sachs and the disgraceful property manager for Canada Lands Company, Alan Schacht, demanded basically 50 grand in payola or this thing doesn't go forward. Well, of course, this event isn't going to make $50,000, so neither we nor the event venue operator could pay that. We were going to have to cancel it. Yara Sachs, the disgraced Liberal MP who poses for selfies with terrorists, the Canada Lands Company, a crown corporation that answers to the Trudeau government, they would have their revenge on Rebel News. Well, a miracle presented itself in the form of Rumble.com, which, of course, is the competitor, the free speech competitor to YouTube. And they said, Ezra, we're co-sponsoring the event. We're a multi-billion-dollar company. We'll just pay it. And I was startled by that. And in some ways, I was mad about that because I don't believe in paying a ransom to hostage takers. I don't believe in paying money to a kidnapper or an extortionist like the Canada Lands Company and Alan Schacht, their middleman, or Yara Sachs. I don't believe in paying extortion. But Rumble.com said we've got to have this event go forward. I want you to know that. I want you to know the extortion that was attempted here, and only by the graces of Rumble.com do we proceed. But if you think that Justin Trudeau's corruption doesn't emanate through every institution in this country under his jurisdiction, you're dead wrong. And a special infamy goes to the Toronto Police Service that actually tried to shake us down here. In the end, we did, of course, hire these countless security and police who have been standing around all day. And I'm not mad at any particular security guard or police officer. They're just doing what they're told and getting some overtime pay, whatnot. But the disgraceful Toronto police chief who ordered this, there was no intel of there being any problems here. There was no reason to shake us down other than perhaps they keep arresting Rebel News journalists like David Menzies, and we're suing them. This was revenge of Trudeau and revenge of the disgraceful Toronto Police Service brass. I want you to know that. I did not pay the ransom. Our friends at Rumble did, and I got their permission to tell you about that. But you should know Justin Trudeau, Yara Sachs, Canada Lands Company, and the Toronto Police Service, if they had got their way, this event would never have happened. And when they get Bill C-60 through, their censorship law through, don't think they won't be coming for us and for you. To help us fight back against their censorship bill, which is the central theme of this meeting, go to stopthecensorship.ca.
Namibia lies in southwest Africa. The Namib Desert stretches for almost 2,000 kilometers along the coast. To the north, the desert is crisscrossed by several dry river valleys. One of them is the Huanib Valley. It runs through the desert for several hundred kilometers and ends in the sea.
Ms. Freeland, how come the IRGC is not a terrorist group? Why is your government supporting Islamo-Nazis? What? Excuse me. What are you doing?
You're under arrest for assault.
Sir,
why are you pushing me? You're under arrest for assault.
Who are you?
You're under arrest for assault.
Police, you're under arrest for assault. How am I under arrest? You bumped into me. You pushed into me. I was just scrubbing. I got my credentials here and you just bumped into me. So excuse
Police, you're under arrest.
What is your name and your badge? What is your name and your badge? You've been told you're under arrest. Why am I under arrest? Come on over here. We've got a couple of He blocked my way. What? I was just scrumming Christian Freeland.
I'm a police officer. You're under arrest.
What is your name and your badge number?
Assaulting a police officer.
How is that possible?
Okay, because
you assaulted me 3 years ago when blackface was back.
I was very aggressive.
You mean I was asking questions aggressively?
No, your actions were. You were almost pushing everybody over. That's how it appears.
Lincoln, you got this on video, right? He's saying I'm pushing people over?
Yeah,
that's an absolute falsehood.
There were feet were shuffling.
So now it appeared that way. That's what you're saying, officer? It appeared I was pushing people. I didn't touch a single person.
That was a little bit aggressive for what was happening. Get that. You're under arrest. Please take the microphone out of my face.
Well, I'd like an ongoing record of this.
Can I have the microphone? Can I have the microphone? Can I have the microphone? Can you give?
I'm not resisting. Take your hand out. Why am I under arrest? I'm just doing my job.
Stop resisting. You don't need to resist, sir.
I don't have.
You don't have to say anything. You know the drill.
I have nothing to hide, officer. Welcome to Blackfaces Canada. This is what they do to journalists. I was merely scrumming Minister Freeland, and a RCMP officer blocked me, and evidently this is now a trumped-up charge of assault, folks. I didn't come here to cause any trouble. I came here to do my job, and now I'm handcuffed. This is your Canada now, folks. You know, this is the Gestapo taking Blackface's orders. Outrageous. And meanwhile, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not a terrorist organization, is not a...
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named Justin. What could possibly go wrong?
I made a mistake, and I'm sincerely sorry.
2 weeks ago, we covered Trudeau's multiple scandals and ethics violations. But that is not the full extent of Trudeau's scandalous past. Trudeau's time as Prime Minister has been mired by innumerable instances of poor conduct, embarrassing gaffes, and attempted cover-ups. This week, we will be covering some of his lesser-known scandals, his failed trip to India, the Mark Norman scandal, the time he and other world leaders were
MPs were coming in to vote on the physician-assisted dying bill, many angry that the Liberals had cut off debate. Now watch this. The man in the front is the Conservative whip. He can't get by a group of NDP MPs, including leader Tom Mulcair. On the left, the Prime Minister comes striding over to intervene. He has words with Mulcair. At the same time, he clearly also makes contact with MP Ruth Ellen Brosseau. Trudeau walks away. You can see Brosseau angrily telling her colleagues what transpired. As Brosseau leaves, Trudeau comes back. Mulcair is enraged. Trudeau appears to be headed after Brosseau. He comes back, and Mulcair and Trudeau shout.
Order, order, order. Members should put away their black, are not allowed to take photographs.
Then it was time to parse what happened.
He elbowed the member from Berthier Mascot. And Mr. Speaker, he manhandled the whip of the official opposition. Physical force in this House is never permitted, is never welcome, and it is entirely inappropriate.
I admit I came in physical contact with a number of members as I extended my arm in, including someone behind me who I did not see. If anyone feels that they were impacted by my actions. I completely apologize. It's not my intention to hurt anyone. It certainly wasn't. It is my intention to get this vote done.
They then voted.
Ms. Watts. Ms. Watts.
But this wasn't over.
The Prime Minister physically grabbing people, elbowing people.
Not only was this the furthest thing from a feminist act.
Then Brosseau spoke.
I was elbowed in the chest by the Prime Minister.
You don't have to listen to Pill's Bandy Doughboy or Team Sexy. I'll tell you what. I'll have a little drink. Celebrate your little picnicky.
This place is going to shit again. You haven't started the recycling program. The park is a complete mess.
Frig off, Burb. Listen for a play at the...
Leahy, I'm not judging anybody here, all right? Okay?
Please don't show this to anyone.
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named Justin. What could possibly go wrong?
I made a mistake, and I'm sincerely sorry.
2 weeks ago, we covered Trudeau's multiple scandals and ethics violations. But that is not the full extent of Trudeau's scandalous past. Trudeau's time as Prime Minister has been mired by innumerable instances of poor conduct, embarrassing gaffes, and attempted cover-ups. This week, we will be covering some of his lesser-known scandals, his failed trip to India, the Mark Norman scandal, the time he and other world leaders were caught making fun of Donald Trump at Buckingham Palace, and the time that he elbowed a female MP in the chest in Parliament. First of all, Trudeau's India trip. Apart from blackface, this is probably Trudeau's most well-known international embarrassment to date. Trudeau's trip to India in 2018 was a disaster from start to finish. From the outset of the trip, it was clear that it was already not going as planned. In something completely out of line with the Indian tradition when receiving a formal visit from a world leader, Prime Minister Modi was not present to greet the entirety of the Trudeau family upon their arrival, nor was any other senior official in India. In the past, Modi has made a conscious effort to greet world leaders upon arrival. Even Donald Trump Jr., according to the international press, received a far grander welcome than Trudeau despite not having any official position in the US government. In the end, Trudeau would not meet with a senior member of the Indian government or Modi himself until a full week into his visit, as his lonely-looking family pictures at various notable Indian locations show. But the embarrassment of being treated like a junior partner by India would turn out to be the least of Trudeau's worries during this trip. What would make his trip go down in infamy was Trudeau's absolutely comical, arguably racist apparel throughout the entirety of the trip. It is the source of some of the most embarrassing photos ever taken of a Canadian Prime Minister that flooded the internet and the news during his visit. One of the most embarrassing moments was when he met with Bollywood's biggest star, while dressed in a scarlet red and predominantly gold sherwani, while Shah Rukh Khan was wearing a suit. Trudeau's ministers also didn't seem to get the memo, or possibly had the foresight to refrain from wearing costumes. To make matters worse, Jaspal Atwal was invited to one of his events, a businessman convicted of attempted murder for his role in the 1986 attempt to assassinate an Indian cabinet minister, and he even got a picture with Sophie Gregoire Trudeau. The trip was a complete disaster. They were snubbed from the outset, wore ridiculous clothes throughout, and even invited a domestic terrorist to an event. In 2019, leaders from NATO's 29 countries were marking the 70th anniversary of the military alliance, with 2 days of meetings and discussions in London, England. During a reception at Buckingham Palace in London, a group of world leaders were gathered in a circle, including Emmanuel Macron, Boris Johnson, and Justin Trudeau. They were all complaining, rather loudly, about President Trump. Trudeau pitched in to complain about the president's tardiness. Unbeknownst to them, they were being filmed the entire time. Trump responded to Trudeau's comments at another news conference with German Chancellor Angela Merkel on the Wednesday afternoon, calling Trudeau two-faced. Although the repercussions for this were slim to none for most of the world leaders involved, the gaffe, which was mainly Trudeau's, garnered a fervor of press attention and unavoidably damaged the relationship between the Trudeau and the Trump administrations, possibly worsening the trade tensions over aluminum tariffs and dairy products that already existed between them. This scandal is actually fairly complex, but here's the rundown. Vice Admiral Mark Norman, a man who was once second in command for the entirety of the Canadian military, was accused of leaking documents that exposed the Liberal government's attempts to slow down or halt a project which would convert a civilian transport vessel into a military vessel. Following these accusations, Vice Admiral Mark Norman was stripped of his high-ranking military position and had his house raided by the RCMP. Justin Trudeau twice publicly hinted that Norman would see the inside of a courtroom all before any criminal charge was laid against him. He was then subjected to an arduous trial, costing thousands of dollars from his own pocket and lasting over 2 years. His GoFundMe for legal fees gained over $440,000 from just over 3,500 contributors. But by mid-2019, the government completely rescinded their accusations. The House of Commons would go on to offer a sweeping apology, and the Trudeau government was forced to announce that they would be reimbursing him for all legal fees he had to incur. As one journalist wrote of Mark Norman, the stakes were high. The federal government's mission was to destroy not only your exemplary military career, but also to ruin you financially and taint the remainder of your life with a criminal record. A frivolous lawsuit against a highly decorated, well-respected, and high-ranking admiral of the Canadian Armed Forces did not spark the outrage many expected, but certainly was a serious embarrassment for the Trudeau government, especially since the project was eventually completed on time and on budget. This was one of Trudeau's earliest scandals. Elbowgate was the incident when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came into physical contact with 2 opposition members of Parliament in the House of Commons on May 18th of 2016 during a parliamentary session. Opposition parties accused the government of trying to ram it through the House and the Senate using various strategies such as assigning a time limit to debate on the closure of a motion on the final reading of Bill C-14, a bill to amend the criminal code to allow physician-assisted death. This resulted in the altercation in the House of Commons. During the incident, Trudeau grabbed Conservative MP Gord Brown by the arm and then inadvertently elbowed New Democratic MP Ruth Ellen Brousseau in the chest, all of it being caught on film. Trudeau subsequently apologized and was not subject to parliamentary sanctions for the incident, but the media attention it garnered was surely enough to put this scandal on the map. Trudeau is often treated as a golden boy, or the standard for how leaders should act by the international press. To Canadians, he's often seen as something very different, a prime minister with one of the longest gaffe lists in recent Canadian political memory. To many Canadians, Trudeau is far less of the dignified statesman he's made out to be by the international press and far closer to a national embarrassment. Much of his sterling reputation exists outside of Canada. This has been our second rundown of Trudeau's scandals. If you haven't seen the first part of this series, be sure to check it out.
Namibia lies in southwest Africa. The Namib Desert stretches for almost 2,000 kilometers along the coast. To the north, the desert is crisscrossed by several dry river valleys. One of them is the Huanib Valley. It runs through the desert for several hundred kilometers and ends in the sea. Water flows here once, at most twice a year. Only deep-rooted plants like anna trees can survive here. Only here, within the valley, can mammals exist in the long term. It is the home of the desert elephants. In contrast to their other African relatives, desert elephants live in particularly small family groups. They are so rare and their way of life is so special that they're under the constant supervision of scientists who've also given the elephants names. The head of this family is alpha cow Clarissa. The animals don't leave her side for a moment. Only Clarissa knows how to survive in this extreme environment. The shoots of the amma tree are now ripe. The pods contain protein-rich seeds. Clarissa has known every one of these trees since her childhood. Even the youngest, Maya, tries the shoots. Here, however, experienced trunk-tip control is required. It's easier for her to get the protein she needs from her mother's milk. Desert elephants only have half the number of calves as other elephants. The male animals stay with their mother's family until they reach sexual maturity. With mock fights, they prepare for life without the protection of the females. Adult bull elephants are loners or travel in small groups. Jappy is the most skillful of them. His younger brother watches enviously as Jappy brings down apparently unreachable branches from the tree. In the valley, Jappy is well known for such tricks. He learned them from his father. Friendship among bull elephants has its limits. Jappy is certainly not willing to share his branch with his younger brother. Their father, One Tusk, is now nearly 60 years old. His trademark is the missing right tusk, lost long ago in a hierarchical battle. For years, he was the undisputed king of the Huanib. Now he lives in seclusion. One Tusk's legs are weak. He can no longer keep up. The aging bull is already being watched by a male jackal, which lives in the Huanib Valley with its partner. Jackals mostly hunt smaller animals, but they wouldn't turn their noses up at a dead elephant. In a side valley, Clarissa has discovered a further source of food. There's a wide selection of bushes, grasses, and herbs. The elephants' climbing skills far surpass those of their savanna-dwelling relatives. This, too, is a form of adaptation to their special habitat. Old One Tusk has at last reached one of the anna trees in the Huanib Valley. But Clarissa and co. haven't left very much for him to eat. He desperately searches for something edible in the remnants. In vain. For the inhabitants of the Namib, survival is hard. They're used to going for long periods without water. Many get liquid from their food or know secret sources of water. Regardless of size, every green leaf contains a minimum of liquid worth harvesting. Outside the dry river valleys, there is scarcely any vegetation. Here, only extreme specialists survive. The Namib desert beetle is no bigger than a fingernail. As all animals, it depends on water for survival and has developed a special strategy. Even the tiniest traces of dampness in the air condense on its carapace. In time, a drop forms, which then flows directly into the beetle's mouth. This way of life limits the distribution of desert beetles to those parts of the desert that see fog. But where does the fog come from? The Namib is one of the few deserts in the world that stretch to the sea. The cold Benguela current from the Antarctic cools the seawater to a temperature of 12 degrees Celsius. When the water reaches land, it evaporates in the warm desert air. Around 200 days a year, the desert is wreathed in mist, which sometimes extends hundreds of kilometers inland into the dry river valleys. The Benguela current doesn't only bring fog, it's also rich in fish. The animals that benefit most are the brown fur seals. Their colonies are often home to 100,000 animals.
Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I'm standing outside Rumble Live, which was a co-production between Rumble, the free speech live streaming platform, and Rebel. And we had a bunch of great speakers today, including Donald Trump Jr. Bit of a big name there. Pretty exciting. Lots of free speech.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Maybe there's a little grass growing right along here. Some happy little things.
I love you. You love me. We all own our own bodies, so marry who you want and do whatever drugs you choose. And when it's time, you can die with dignity by determining your own end-of-life plan.
Hi, Maria!
Hi, Officer Winkles!
How you doing today?
I don't have to answer that question.
That is correct!
I'm recording you!
Am I being detained?
Nope!
Which I can legally do because I'm in a public place!
Come back if you have a warrant!
Alrighty!
Know your rights!
Yay!
Okay, Gumshoes, Carmen Sandiego is in a country where socialism failed. That narrows it down to Venezuela, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, Moldova, Laos, Vietnam, Albania, Angola.
So we did some digging into your past.
Oh, the suspense is killing me!
But we still haven't solved the case, Holmes. Why is marijuana a Schedule I drug?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Nixon and racism.
What?
You okay? I don't know. Hey man, it's alright. It's alright. We've got qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. It's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog.
I shot your wife.
I get to go on with my life.
My favorite part is where the character says, I do not want green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am says, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. That's your right. The end. It's a short book.
Here we see one of the last taxicab monopolies struggling for life. Competitors have entered their ecosystem.
Do you know what eminent domain abuse is? It's when the government decides the neighborhood of make-believe is better used by a Taiwanese LCD manufacturer.
Today we have a real senator. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
What is your favorite color?
I would have to say blue.
Me too. Tell me, why did you sell all your stock right before the crash?
I mean, it's literally just the tragedy of the commons, but they made it cute.
And that sound means we're in international waters. I'm gonna marry a robot and sell my kidney on eBay.
My dearest Rowena, today the district attorney filed criminal charges against a two-door sedan.
Carmen Sandiego is hiding in a country that contains an American military base. Is she in Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Cuba, Germany, Djibouti?
Menace. Circle, square, rectangle, war factory.
All right, Jack, where is your gay wedding cake?
I refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, and you can't force me to. It's my right.
That is your right, but it is my right to kick you off of this show. Please leave.
Yep.
You homophobic bearded meat goblin.
I just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
Well, today on This Old House, we're at the city zoning office because they think our new porch is 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, which is f***ing bullshit because their sidewalk is too far away from the street, which they'd know about if they'd read any of the emails I'd sent them over the past 18 months. So join us as we waste our whole f***ing day on this shit.
The premiere of Thomas the High-Speed Rail has been delayed again. And at the 10 Bitcoin level, you receive a handsome tote bag.
Quack! Good one!
Quiet!
Very good!
Queen!
What else starts with the letter Q?
Space lasers.
Oh!
John Podesta and Hillary Clinton had an email exchange about hot dogs.
Where do we get these puppets?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms. With firearms.
So you want to vote for a pretty boy Canadian named